When it comes to whiskey, I'm a peat monster. I just love the stuff. So today what we're going to try and do is find a completely different way of getting that totally unique peat flavor into whiskey. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse and this is Still It. And like I said in the intro, we are going to be using a different technique to get peat into our whiskey really quickly. I guess just in case there's people out there that don't know what the deal is here. Peat is literally decomposed plant material that has sort of been compacted and degraded in the ground, and you can dig it up, dry it out, and literally burn the stuff. So the smoke from that peat is what flavors peated whiskies, typically really famously from the Islay region in Scotland. Traditionally, peat was the fuel of choice to heat things in Scotland. So when they were heating and drying the barley at the end of the malting process, the smoke from the peat fires just kind of naturally got into that malt, which then made it into the mash, which made it through over into the final whiskey. If you're going to have a peat flavor in a whiskey, it is almost always there by virtue of smoking the barley before it gets mashed. You can buy peated barley, that's not a problem. So why on earth would we want to do anything different? Well, number one, just geekery and trying different things is, well, it's fun. I enjoy that. And number two, because we're home distillers, we don't have to stress about, specific definitions of what things are or what things aren't. And perhaps you just want to put peat flavor into something different. Perhaps you want to make a sugar wash and then peat it. How do you smoke sugar? I don't know. Can you? That's not what we're doing today. We're using a totally different technique. Anyway, let's get stuck in. The technique we're going to use today allows us to literally cram the peat smoke flavor into the wash at the point when it's already in the fermenter. So we don't need grain, we don't need anything like that. And for that reason, we're going to be using these whiskey artisan kits from Still Spirits. Now, Still Spirits is sponsoring this video, and they very kindly sent me 2 more of these kits to play with. I've used them in the past, and I am actually quite pleasantly surprised with them. So they're super simple to put together. You just mix water, the liquid malt extract or LME, the sugar, the yeast nutrient, top it all up to hit your temperature and your volume. In this case, I was aiming for 25 degrees Celsius, and that's it. You've got a whiskey. It does have sugar in it, so it's not a real whiskey, but it's a whiskey and it's in the fermenter and ready to go to be fermented as is, or in our case, experimented with. Now it's time for the smoke. And if you want smoke, you need a fuel. If you're trying to peat a whiskey, that fuel has to be peat. There's no 2 ways around it. I've decided to use Irish peat logs. The reason I decided to go with these things is that they are pretty easy to get in a lot of different places. I know maybe where you are getting hold of peat is super easy. Where I am, not the case. And remember guys, remember that peat moss and peat, 2 totally different things. Don't use peat moss. Yes, this is Irish peat, not Scottish peat, and yes, there probably is going to be a slight flavor difference. I know there definitely is, a change in flavor profile for the peat that we find here in New Zealand. I went with this once again because it's relatively easy to get. You can literally get these things on Amazon. That's where I bought mine from. It was cheaper and easier to buy it on Amazon and have it posted to New Zealand than it was to get it in New Zealand itself. So if you're interested in the exact brand that I used, I'll put a photo up here of what I used, and I'll put a link in the description down below to find it on Amazon. If you're like Ty from Andalusia Distillery in Texas, he just uses these things whole because he is smoking a buttload of grain at the same time. Me, I'm not doing a buttload of anything. It's a 30-litre wash. A chisel and a hammer will let you break these things down or chip them down into manageable size pieces. We've got the fuel, now we need the tool, and I am using a cold smoker that I built myself. These things are not complex. You can, buy them all over the place, but you people are resourceful. If you want to make your own, it's pretty simple. Oh, and yes, the flavor that you get from peat smoke is totally different than the flavor you get from wood smoke. So if you want to do this process with your favorite wood, whether it be oak or hickory or apple or cherry or whatever it happens to be, that's fine. Go right ahead. Just know that you will get a different result. We've got the tool, we've got the fuel. Now it's time for the technique. And it really was pretty simple, guys. I just cracked the top of the fermenter, snuck this thing in there, blew a bunch of smoke into it until it was literally nothing but smoke in the headspace, and then closed the fermenter up. Here's the little thing that I'm kind of proud of. I think this worked pretty well. I snuck a paint mixer through the airlock hole in the top of the fermenter, so I could mix it up and sort of agitate and force interaction between the liquid and the smoke. So, blew smoke in there, agitated for about 5 minutes, let it sit for half an hour, and then blew more smoke. Agitated it for 5 minutes, let it sit for half an hour. You get the idea. I did that, I think, 4 times in total. If you want to do more, that's fine. If you want to do less, that's fine too. It's entirely up to you. Next up, we have fermentation. Now, like I said earlier on, I was aiming for 25 degrees Celsius. Obviously, because I let this thing sit for 2 hours, the temperature dropped a little bit, but I have the luxury of being able to temperature control the fermentation, so I wasn't too worried about it. So I pitched the whiskey yeast that comes in the Artisan Whiskey Kit box from Still Spirits at about 23 degrees Celsius, set my temperature controller for 25 degrees Celsius, and let it go. Your mileage may vary on time, but most of these things are going to be done in between sort of 6 and 10 days. I do suggest letting it completely finish out so the gravity isn't dropping anymore. Test it with a hydrometer. It's the only way to really know. And let it sit for maybe 2 or 3 days after that before distillation. The tool of choice, no surprises, the video is sponsored by Still Spirits. It's the T500 with the alembic dome, but this thing is also kind of the perfect size. I've been using it quite a lot lately for the sort of 15 to 30 litre washes. I put most of the wash into the still and retained about 5 litres, kept that aside to use later on. While the still was heating up, I filled it up with smoke again. Yes, guys, it is a cold smoking machine. The still is not running. It's really not a safety issue. If you are going to do this, just, a little common sense, guys. I ran the stripping run hard and fast. We're just cutting down volume. I then took the low wines, put them back into the pot along with the, I don't know, maybe roughly 5 litres of retained wash, just to bump the volume up a little bit for the spirit run, and ran the spirit run. In terms of cuts, I took about 600 mils combined of heads and foreshots, and then started collecting hearts. Now, the plan for this whiskey was to go pretty grungy, to go down low into the tails, or perhaps even skip the wet dog segment and go hunting for more smoke down low, see if we could find something interesting. But while I was tasting the spirit coming off the still, the dark specialty malts in the whiskey kit interacting with the smoke, it just presented as this really cool, more pretty, delicate whiskey, like with a firm layer of smoke, but not an overpowering smoke. And that kind of changed my mind. So during the run, I changed my plan, and I only collected down to about 45% and then just cut and didn't go looking any further. I was really happy with the result at that point. This is the final result, and the plan is to let this sit for a while. But I also have put a sample through the ultrasonic machine, just to rush things along and give a better idea to you guys of what this might taste in the future, but also help me decide what I want to do with it right now. There's a bug in there, or, oh no, it's a piece of charcoal. So let's get into tasting this stuff, guys. But before we do, I need to say a huge thank you to the Patreons. Thank you so much for the support, team. I thoroughly appreciate the monetary side of things, but I also really appreciate the input into the channel. For those of you that don't know, when Still Spirits said they were sending over 2 of these kits, the Patreons gave me a bunch of ideas and then voted on what to make. This is result number 1, and this one over here is result number 2. There's going to be another video coming out very shortly, in a few days, showing off what that is. Anyway, peated whiskey and aging. I've had some peated products that over time the peat just tanks. It just slowly disappears. I've had some where the peat just slowly goes up, and I've had some where it kind of does this, like you taste it 1 month and the peat's quite high. You wait for 3 or 4 months and it's sort of getting really low, and then you come back 6 months later and it's come back up again. I don't know what this is going to do. There doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason for it. Not that I can work out anyway. If the peat stays relatively the same as to where it is now, I am going to be a very happy man. If it goes up slightly, I'll be a happy man. If it goes down a little bit, I'll be a happy man. So what I'm saying is right now I love the peat level on this for the whiskey it is. Whether it's going to stay like that over time, I can't tell you. But anywho, on the nose, fruity, hits you right up front, which is lovely. It's a lovely light orchard fruitiness, which is part of that sort of pretty thing that I said that I found while it was coming off the still. There's smoke in the middle, but not a lot of it, just a hint. And then there are the darker caramel and almost like fudge flavors that I get a lot coming through with this whiskey kit from Still Spirits. It makes sense. There's obviously a lot of dark specialty malts in there because the it looks like a stout that you're putting down in the fermenter. So on the nose, I'm pretty happy with that. The wood is just starting to come through. A slight amount of vanilla. By the way, this was American white oak that was charred to about, I don't know, like a little bit short of an alligator char, I would say. So the nose is very pleasant. Even now it's pleasant. It's not jaggy at all. It's pretty. It's subdued in terms of the alcohol and the alcohol burn. And I'm always torn. I'm always torn when a whiskey smells and tastes the same. In some ways it's nice because it's not I don't know, it's honest. It's not lying about itself on the nose and the smell. And then in other ways it's kind of just boring because there's no fun surprises. I don't know. This is very much the same thing on the palate. Fresh, fruity, bright up front, a interesting light ashtray peat with a hint of the bacony sort of side of things, but not much. And then it drops down into the darker caramelly side of things with a interesting, actually slightly astringent finish on this as well, which actually works. It works really well because it offsets that sweetness from the fudge and caramel kind of flavors. I'm happy with this. I'm really happy with this. I hope that this ends up pretty similar to what came out of the ultrasonic machine. It is definitely still like green, young whiskey. It shows up as grassy and just, I don't know, the flavors all haven't come together yet quite as well as I would hope for. The barrel candy, which I'm actually hoping for a little bit, hasn't come out yet a whole lot in this. But I have very high hopes for it, guys. So the plan is I've put a buttload of wood in here, as you can probably tell. There is 1, 2, 3, 4 staves about this long in it. It's hard to tell with light refracting all over the place and stuff. The plan is to let this go for probably, I don't know, anywhere from 2 weeks to maybe 6 weeks and get it to the point where it's kind of crammed full of wood and starting to borderline on being, do we have too much oak in here or not? Yank probably all but one of those staves out and then let it sit for a pretty good amount of time, like maybe a year. I don't know. We'll just see what happens. We'll see how it progresses. But that's the plan. It tastes like peat. It doesn't taste like wood smoke. It doesn't taste like peat smoke when you're blowing it around in the air. But the flavors that are coming through in the whiskey are flavors that I 100% associate with normal, off the shelf, really good peated whiskies. So I'm going to call this a tentative success, and I really hope to see and hear from some of you guys that pick this up and run with it and do all sorts of crazy things with it, like I know you will. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, if you found it entertaining, or even better, if you found it inspiring, give me a thumbs up. I'd love that. Drop a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you soon for this one, guys. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.